Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. It's a real honour to host this podcast. My name's Rav. I'm a journalist. I am a reporter for ITV News Central, so I'm based in the Midlands. I've been reporting, being a journalist for about 8 years, but I'm now an honorary Brummie, and I've been living here for about a year now, and focusing on stories in the Midlands, in and around Birmingham and the Black Country. And today we are talking about caring, providing and thriving women's health and well-being, and we have a brilliant panel here. So I'm going to go from left to right and we'll introduce each other. Everyone's got some amazing skills, great skill set. So I'll start with Nina over here.
Thank you. So, hello everybody. So my name's Nina Samra. In terms of my capacity here today, I'm a trustee of the Seek Recovery Network. We work with people or victims of addiction, but also their families as well. It's a massive epidemic in our community, whether we choose to talk about it or not. So we bang that drum and want to talk about it. Aside from that, I have done a diploma in counselling and I'm a project manager by profession. And the reason why I sort of raised that is because we're just normal people doing some other work on the side. So it's a bit like, what is your purpose? My purpose isn't to be a project manager, I don't think, but it's more to give back to my community and learn from experiences. Thank you.
Hi guys, my name's Saren. Is my mic working? Yeah, my name's Saren Kaur and I'm based in Derby and the West Midlands. I am a full-time psychotherapist. I have a background in neuroscience and quantum physics. It's really about bridging spirituality, namely, with mental health and some of the challenges that we uniquely face as Sikhs. It's about deconditioning in terms of cultural conditioning and cultural wiring, which sometimes can be unhelpful. And it's about trauma processing, not just trauma from the here and now, but intergenerational trauma, generational trauma, breaking cycles really so that we are able to live more optimally. So there's a range of modalities I work with because I'm an integrative therapist. I also am the staff therapist at Seek Women's Aid, and I also am a therapist, like a consultant at Seek Recovery Network. So they're so kind to host me. So I love working with clients on a full-time basis. It's a lot of varied and diverse challenges that I see when I talk to individuals, as well as something that you can see as a common theme across the community as well. So really, I wouldn't know where to begin in terms of isolating things, but we have a lot of work to do as a community, a lot of deconditioning and unlearning, because I do believe that wiring is what's led to a lot of us feeling unsafe within our body. So I teach people how to come out of their head and into the body, which is where trauma is really stored. And until we do not process that on an energetic level with our attention and our acknowledgement of our inner child wounds or younger self wounds, then the rest of our life will continue to repeat. That's why you notice there are cycles and in life in terms of experience. I can see a lot of you nodding your head, and that's because it's a lot to do with the brain conserving energy as well, but I don't want to go into the scientific side of things. But we as a community need to learn how to break cycles or there will be no change. So it's about, when I work with these organizations, as well as with my individual clients, it's about empowering people to become the highest version of their self, which is, also, as we know as Sikhs, that's God within you. It's connecting to the God gene and allowing that ego and that wounded side of us to take a step to the side and stop operating through us, so we have a chance for change.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Over here, we have Serena.
Hi everyone, I'm Serena. I work in the fertility space. So myself and my husband opened up about our fertility journey a few years ago now. We went through 2 miscarriages and then a failed IVF cycle. Went on to adopt and were very blessed to have a little boy naturally afterwards. We filmed a documentary back in 2023, opening up about our journey and just really supporting women, couples and men who were going through that difficult journey and being that support, because we found that we really didn't have anything when we went through it ourselves.
And yourself, Sukhvinder Kaur?
Hi, my name is Sukhvinder Kaur. Everyone calls me Sukhi. I am the co-founder and the chair of trustees at Sikh Women's Aid. It has been probably one of the hardest and happiest decisions we ever made to launch Sikh Women's Aid. I also serve as the organization's faith and exploitation lead. So that deals with abuse in a Sikhi context where Sikhi is misused, is mispercharged in a way that causes harm rather than the healing that it was meant to provide. We actually started off our work doing a survey in the community because we said if we're going to set something up, we need our women to tell us what's happening. So we have run 3 consecutive surveys. Please do visit our website and read the reports that we have written. This is Sikh Punjabi women telling us their problems. And Sikh Women's Aid will now grow and develop based on women's needs, not on what we think they need, but what they're telling us. So we've been running for 3 years. We've probably supported about 600 women and children in that time. And I'm going to echo what the other speakers have said, that I think the Sikh Punjabi community is on a cliff edge of change, that if we don't change, we are going to come to a point of no return. I also serve as a domestic homicide review chair as well. So when women and girls are murdered or died by suicide or their death is suspicious, I chair reviews into the learnings around their death. So I work in a multi-agency capacity across the United Kingdom. I sit as an expert, my panel member for Sikh Punjabi women who have been killed. So I'll also serve on those reviews. And just 2 things I want to leave people with today. It's not just husband and wives. It's the toxic relationship between sons and mothers that is now coming into the domestic homicide review space where sons are killing mothers. And when we look at root causes, and I'm going to finish off by where we started, collaboration and change. I think these are the 2 biggest things that our community needs to be working towards. And if we don't, we lose more than we're going to be gaining over the next generation. And like many of you, I'm a parent. I have 2 boys. And the kind of legacy that we as a community are leaving behind worries me, because I don't think we're leaving a very good legacy despite having good intentions to leave a legacy. But if we're going to keep avoiding the problems, whether it's substance misuse, mental health, distorted responses to pregnancy, infertility, domestic abuse, sexual abuse, the misuse of Sikhi also, if we don't start tackling these things head on, then we are going to come to a point of no return, because we've seen this happen in other communities. So, Rab is showing us everything, where we are, where we're going. And as a collective, we're all saying the same thing in different spaces, which is fascinating. So I'm going to end there and go into the discussion. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Everyone here has amazing skill sets. So in the hour and a half we have, I guess we're going to try and tap into as much as possible and have a really good discussion. So when I ask the questions, just jump in whenever you guys want to, basically. But what I want to start with is this question: what will people think? I'm sure we've all heard, what will people think about you doing this, doing that, in some sort of capacity? And today we're talking about mental health in the Punjabi community and women's health. What will people think about that? Are you sure we can discuss that? Are we sure we can discuss it in this sort of level? Today we can, and we're going to start with the question: when you hear about mental health, when you hear mental health, women's health, what's the first thing that comes into your mind? And everyone's got different experiences. And I'm going to start with you, Serena. You've already tapped into your experience in fertility and your journey. So when you hear mental health, what's the first thing that comes into your mind, tapping into what you've gone through?
I think in our community, it's hugely about the stigma. And like you said, what will people think? That's the first thing anyone mentions mental health. I think we've been conditioned to run away from it and hide away from it because it holds such a high stigma in our community. But also, I find that just by saying to somebody, this has affected my mental health, is so powerful. And I think those conversations can be opened up, and they are being opened up. Essentially, now we are breaking that stigma, breaking that taboo. And it very much goes back to what will people think. That's the biggest thing in our community, is what will people think. Whether you go through any of the topics that we'll cover today, I think everybody already thinks, how will I be judged? what will people think of me? But it is so powerful to open up that conversation and be the person that says, actually, I have gone through this. Something that we found in our journey was having that first conversation really opened up conversations with other people who had gone through a similar thing and not spoken about it. And I think it's so important to recognise that there is power in connecting and having a similar journey or even a different journey, but some way, shape or form you will connect on that journey.
And you mentioned being judged. So when you openly went through the process and talking about it and being on TV about it, showing all your whole journey of your fertility journey, tell us a bit about how, what were people saying about that? What were people's reactions to that? Were you happy with the outcome, and how was that?
It was definitely a mixed review. People would say, no, you shouldn't talk about it. Don't tell anyone what you're going through. But mine and my husband's response to that was, why not? Why are we hiding away? Why are we not talking about what we're going through? Because it's a very real part of our lives. And you're asking the question of, when are you having children and why is it not happening? Why should we not open up back to you and tell you this is the real deal? We are struggling and this is why we're struggling. I think, having that conversation then turned into, oh, actually, well, I went through something similar, or I know someone who went through something similar. So why are we hiding?
Anyone want to jump in terms of, in your skill sets, what you think mental health is?
I think if we're being unique for the Sikh community, whether that's men and women, if there's 2 words that I had to use, or 3, when I say dysregulated or in survival, what I mean is unsafe. And then the other word would be disconnected or repressed. And I feel like that is a recipe for disaster, because if you look at what underpins that, there's loneliness, isolation. And when there is loneliness, you're not actually using the social engagement system part of your brain, which is essential to you having coherence in the body, which is when your mind and your heart are basically we'd call it Brahman, which is life force. It's flowing optimally. If it doesn't, then your health, not just your mental health, but your physical health is being affected. And the reason I said dysregulated is because, or survival, is somebody might be like, well, what's that got to do with survival? But your nervous system, which is a primitive survival sort of system in the body, it doesn't know that it's your thoughts or stresses or your culture that is stressing you out. It thinks there's a literal lion chasing you in the jungle, because it's based on primitive system to keep you alive. So that will keep you in fight, flight, or freeze. When you're in those spaces, your nervous system literally feels unsafe, that it's at threat. And we release stress hormones in our body when that happens. And that massively affects the way you react, the way you communicate, the way you breathe, the way you interact, everything, your heart rate, your blood pressure. These are really important things, because us as Punjabi, as a community, our heart disease is up there. Heart disease, diabetes, and hormonal issues. And it all comes down to feeling unsafe in the body. And you're feeling unsafe in the body because there is judgment. And there is cultural norms and conditioning that I can't go against the grain. I can't stand out, because we don't know how to have a voice. It's unsafe to have a voice, and I can't stress enough how we can be people pleasers, how we have no boundaries. This will eventually catch up with us, and it has. That's why you'll see not only mental health through the roof in our community, but physical health. So these go hand in hand, and repression means you're burying it. So some people use the word suppress, but the real word in psychology is repression. It's when you are repressing your feelings and emotions and thoughts around things, and then they're being buried in the subconscious. Us as a collective unconscious are very wounded and damaged individuals. But I don't want to make it all doom and gloom. We're very resilient as well, but there comes a time where resilience works against you. You cannot keep burying things. You cannot keep being strong. There's a time where you've been strong for too long. That's where, where there's total dysregulation. And us as a community, and me doing this job day in, day out, that's all I see. The key word that underpins everything that I see through mental health: unsafe, dysregulation.
I also just think on that, these situations that we go through in terms of all of our expertise is what brings out that resilience where it breaks and where we break and we crack open. I really think that that's important to recognise. That's those trauma specific situations is when we break and when we open up and when we start to then think, actually, something needs to change.
Just really building on that, when you talked about suppression and repression, what is the consequence of that? Now, I think Nina and I, in the work that we do at Seek Recovery, at Seek Women's Aid, we see the consequence of that is that when you're not dealing with something, life deals with it. So if you're in an abusive relationship, but you've been told, and like, you know, some of the honor codes, like, you know, you talked about honor-based shame, this is really rooted in honor. And if we're talking about honor, yes, men are impacted by honor in one way, but women, the entirety, sometimes in some families, the entire family's honor is placed between the woman's legs. And I think that is one of the distorted things that we ever did to not just my generation of women, my mother's generation, her mother's generation. Then we were talking about this just before we came live, that what we're now dealing with is we're now the intergenerational, so what our grandmothers passed to our mothers, what our mothers have passed to us. Now we're holding this baggage with our children in front of us. And now we're at a point now where if you continue it, that's just destruction, because that cannot be maintained. Everything that Sadan's just described there, that's not sustainable for any human being. You don't have to be Sikh Punjabi for this. And I do want to not reassure people, but there is a crisis across society right now. This is not just the Sikh Punjabi community. What we're talking about, we're probably one of the later communities to come to have spaces like this. I speak to many colleagues in the Muslim community. Their mosques and their masjids and mosques are becoming community hubs where mental health, immigration, substance misuse, women's groups, ISVAs, they are based in their religious spaces. We're still having I think we're having an identity crisis here in the UK, because you have the Sikh, then you have the Punjabi. And I have more hope in the Punjabis these days, I'm sorry, I'm going to say, because what there's an acceptance that something's gone wrong. I can't put my finger on what's gone wrong, but something's going wrong and we need to fix it. But where I think the Sikh element is coming in is that we've had all this beautiful prachar done about how amazing Sikhs are, but the work we do, we have victims and perpetrators who are Amritari of all sorts of crimes. This is from domestic abuse, child sexual abuse, religious abuse. This is happening. We can't keep saying, log ki kehnge, isse bare gall nahi karna, because who benefits from that? It is the people who cause trauma. Because in every community and facet of society, I think as people, we're all right. You know, we kind of learn and we adapt. But there's a galabo masi in every family, or there's a galabo masar. I don't know how else to describe that persona of person, but we all know galabo masi, don't we? And there's that one galabo masi, whether it's the nanny, whether it's the pua, whether it's the chachi, or it can be a male. It could be the nana, it could be the father, the matriarch or the patriarch as we call them. And there's always someone who is there just ready to like shoot their arrows of dysfunction right at yours, because if you're showing stability and they don't have that stability in their home, they have to bring their own instability and push it into other families. Now, this is something we've done comedies, even like domestic abuse, like we've almost commodified it. Like some very famous Punjabi influencers will do skits about the psycho mother who's throwing shoes at her son or at her husband. But do we ever explore where this came from? It came from dysfunction. It came from lack of communication, where dad's not talking to mom about the kids, or mom's not talking to dad about the kids because dad's too busy dealing with his own stuff. Mom has to traditionally hold the family together. Mom carries the weight when something goes wrong. So when we're talking about mental health and what words come to mind, it's breaking point. And I think we've hit breaking point now, because now those mothers who lulled their sons, those sons are now murdering their mothers. becoming full circle now. And when you're in an organization that collaborates data, you start to see where things are turning full circle. And what we have to do as collective is say, right, where are the entry points that we can disrupt this behavior? And that comes back down to community, social workers, schools, hospitals, mental health professionals are not going to come into your families and correct these dysfunctions. So really next step is how do we kind of move forward from that, I guess.
And you spoke about breaking point. When it comes to mental health and then the breaking point after that, it can take many different forms. And I'm going to bring you in, Nina, because you're looking at addiction, and does that work hand in hand, do you think?
Yeah, so just with regards to mental health and what it means, what I would say, it means different things to different people in the same community. And just before we started the podcast, we alluded to our parents. So they have mental health issues because we all have mental health, right? They have mental health issues, but they don't recognize it, and they'll go, "Koi na chal ho, meri kismat hai," right? They'll use languages like that, and it's a bit unfair because they don't understand or realize actually it's a mental health issue. You need a bit of help, maybe, helping you maneuver that. We asked a question like when our mothers went through menopause. If you ask your mum, when did you go through menopause? Some of them will be like, "Patani, I can't remember." They've repressed that feeling. So I think when we think about mental health and what it means, I think it means different things to different generations. But I would say it's a negative aura. It's a negative vibe. We're not, if your friend rings you and go, "I'm struggling," like straight away your heart sinks. You're not thinking, "We've got this, what we're going to do." And it could just be a walk. I think your mind just thinks depression. It's very morbid, when we think about that. But it doesn't need to be. I think it's about this bit, I'm struggling with this bit, I just need some support, and it's what does support look like, which I know we're going to talk on to later. So just back to, your question with regards to
your skill. Well, I guess if people going through mental health, like you said, in different generations, the breaking point of that, which you mentioned, can take many different forms, and you obviously have the skill set.
So we work with addicts, and that could be, drugs or alcohol, predominantly intoxication. I work predominantly with the families, and on Mondays I have a family support group, which we do on Zoom, and this is basically for the family and friends of the person who's in addiction, their loved one who's in addiction. You won't believe the mental health issues they have off of the back of that person, because, if you think about it, if I just use a child of mine as an example, it would affect me and my husband. It would affect Kamal's mum and dad and my mum and dad. It affects so many people because you're so worried. So everyone's mental health is impacted, but you don't get to justify it. So unless you're a spouse or unless you're a parent, you don't get to justify how you feel. So you don't know what to do with those emotions because you're a bit like, am I entitled to feel this way? So we say like addiction's a family illness and we also say that when someone goes into recovery, the whole family has to go into recovery. One of the things we say with the addict is when they want to go into recovery, they have to admit they have to do a step one and they're powerless to the addiction. But the family also have to do that, and they struggle. They struggle to use the word addiction. They struggle to express how they feel. They have trouble to be honest about the fact that they're struggling because they'll go, that's not going to resolve what you're feeling. It's not going to resolve what you're going through, And when we do talk about addiction stuff, sometimes we say you need to detach. We say detach with love. It took me such a long time to understand that because I was like, how can you detach from someone you love? But for my own mental health or for everyone's mental health, you have to. And you have to recognize that that's not rejecting. It's doing it through love, and it's to look after your mental health and make sure that doesn't become an illness, because we all know, and I'm sure Saran will allude to this, that, when it takes over your body, then you have physical symptoms. And I actually didn't know that mental health issues can give you physical symptoms until 2020, when I literally thought I was going to have a heart attack on a walk. I was like, oh my God, what's this feeling? What's this physical feeling I'm having? I'd never experienced something like that. That was the first time I realized, and I suppose up until then I was probably ignorant. Because with some of this stuff, if we've not even been through it ourselves, yes, we can have compassion and empathy. I don't think you fully understand it. So I think some of the work we're doing is what's brought us here and probably enabled us to talk about it more. But it does manifest itself in many ways. And actually on my support group call, I have I have predominantly what's interesting is it's open to all, but I get women. I do have a few Bajis, but they kind of drop off after a bit. But you get mums, you get wives, and you get sisters and daughters. So you get varied generations having varied feelings. And one thing we've acknowledged on that support group is children of addicts, particularly like daughters who are like 20, 21 at uni, sadly, they're struggling. And I'm like, God, there's a gap there. What we're going to do with these kids?
Can I just come in there? Because what you've just said, it just literally gave me goosebumps, because when you just said that 21-year-old girl who is now going to uni and grew up with the alcoholic as a dad, subconsciously, she will search for that same man to build a relationship in university, because a child doesn't know the alcoholic dad is unsafe. There's just dad and there's mom. Those are the primary caregivers. And this is so fascinating. And I've just had that moment now as you were talking, that this all links, that when you've had that upbringing and you've just seen, you know, when dad's sober, dad is fine. When dad is drunk, it's a completely different person. That fight or flight, not feeling safe, it becomes norm for that child. They don't see it as maladaptive or coping strategies. For them, dad is dad, mom is mom. So when, let's call her Kiran. I'm so apologetic to anyone who's called Kiran in the room, but let's call this 21-year-old girl Kiran. Kiran goes to uni and she meets Bobby. I'm so sorry to all the Bobbies in the room, but Kiran meets Bobby. Bobby reminds her of dad. She thinks of dad when he's sober, but she'll disregard Bobby when he's drunk Bobby, acting like daddy drunk Bobby. This is how maladaptive trauma shapes our experiences. And if I hadn't been working with like Nina and Saran to learn how what we're seeing is a precursor of things that girls saw very young, then you can start to map where this goes and at what point you can intervene. But we as services, we can only go so far, because you do the work with the families. Often women are ringing us in complete isolation. A lot of the younger girls will have support from families if they're in an abusive relationship, but heaven forbid she chose her own. Because remember, Kiran chose Bobby. Now, if Bobby and Kiran get married, mom and dad are going to say, this is the new thing now. So first it was jidda aisi kya utthe biyah karna hai. Then it's when you choose your own, then it's tu api chuniyasi. The point is, no person chooses an abusive spouse out of choice. No one says, "Ye mere shittar marda hai, ede naal main rehna sari umar." I mean, come on, we're not doing that. So when you hear that response like, "Tu hi chuniyasi," and it's like, yeah, of course, I married him so he could beat me up every day and take my money. That's why I married him, wasn't it? Sometimes you don't know these things until you start living with someone.
To add to that point, although you didn't choose, that is, you did not consciously choose. You unconsciously, or some would say subconsciously, have just picked a familiar pattern. So key here again is psychoeducation. It's okay to know this stuff after you messed up your life or your life got messed up. We need to be having preventative spaces like this. We need to understand what psychoeducation is and how it will help break these cycles, because between the ages of 0 to 7 is where your subconscious is formed. Now, your subconscious is what sets the tone for the rest of your life, what happened between 0 and 7. The good news is that neuroscience now tells you you're not bound to that for the rest of your life. You have neural pathways on the brain, which means you can change. You can change what happened between 0 and 7, or you can at least outgrow it or process what happened and build kind of new patterns that are more healthy. But for me, the word unconscious is a very, and unaware is a big deal for not even just humanity, but just trying to keep it focused to the community. There's an unawareness of psychoeducation. But if we knew, when we created spaces where you can become fully informed about these things, it means you will understand what's happening to your body, to your mind, what's coming next, how to intercept those loops. Does that make sense? So just knowing about the nervous system is very, very important, because I use those words interchangeably. The subconscious, the nervous system, and your soul are one and the same thing. So when we talk about Sikhi, like there's like a Gal Burk is inside you, hosting your soul, your individuation, to have a body, to have a physical experience, that soul is the nervous system. It is your subconscious. This is where you get karmic debt. So some people, you can be the best person on this planet, but at the point of your physical, expiration, if you still have wounds, trauma, distress, things that have not been processed, that will mean you now need another June to alleviate that. Does that make sense? So we need to understand that having therapy is not taboo. It's nothing to be ashamed of. Yeah, it's actually, it means you're smart. If you have therapy, you are smart, because what you're doing is you're deleting files that no longer serve you. We are quantum computers, and we are at the mercy of what's trapped in us and what's happened to us, and it stays on repeat. We have the right, and we should all have the right and the awareness to be able to delete files that no longer serve us and create new wiring. Like, I cannot explain how powerful you are. God literally resides in you. In Bani, it tells you, Apna Mool Pashana, recognize who you are. You are buried under your name, your religion, your cultural conditioning, your job, your status. But those things always change. When you were in your mother's womb, you didn't have a name or a religion or siblings or experiences. So who are you really? You think you're those things, but you're stillness. You are stillness, but that has been buried. And the whole point of Sikhi is remembering who you are and coming back home to your safe, back to safety. So Sikhi Prachar needs to change. It needs to change. This is why in my therapy, Sikhi comes into it. It has to come into it, because that is how you cleanse or how you process trauma. And I don't just mean Bani, but the very elements in Sikhi, they actually coincide perfectly with Jungian philosophy, Freudian philosophy, all these theories that we get. A lot of these people, like these revered psychologists and psychotherapists, guess where they learn? In the East. And it comes from Sikhi and, a bit of Hinduism, a bit of Buddhism, but we have a perfect way of life in front of us, and we don't utilize it. So I make sure that when I work, that kind of operates through me, that we deliver that and to empower people, because we don't know, like, it's a treasure, it's a khajana, Bani is. And I'm not saying, I've seen some horrible things where people be like, oh, it's in your head, it's not mental health, it's you just need to do Bani. No, I've seen people pass away from suicide because they've not got the help that they should have got, because, oh, I need to do more Bani. We're not saying that Bani is about your perception. The Turki Bani, you get Bani, but Bani is also you connecting home. It's coming home to yourself and operating.
Just to come in there, it's like I've long said this, that one of the very, I'm going to call it a very bad habit that we have, is reading Gurbani without any understanding of what we are reading. It is one of the things that we have been encouraged to do, which is maladaptive. Because I'm going to be really honest, how many people here knows what Guru Nanak is trying to explain to you in Japji Sahib at this level, at a cellular, personal level? But what we were all told to do was get gutke and start reciting. Now when we did Pride and Prejudice in school, you were taught in school how to analyze text. That's how Gurbani should be treated. When Gurbani is talking about man tu jot swaroop hai apna mool pashan. So there's a voice talking. Someone is explaining to his own man. There's different voices speaking in Gurbani. Your higher consciousness, the mind, the intelligence, all this comes out in Gurbani. And everything that Saran says, I could just see the Gurbani Shabd that align to what you were saying. But this is where I say that there is a failure on our religious institutions to really change the face of how Gurdwaras serve their Sangat. And honestly, guys, when I say Sangat, you are all the Sangat. A Gurdwara only runs because a Sangat goes in and fills the golak of that Gurdwara. Please stop filling the golaks of Gurdwara that do not serve our next generation and failed us as a generation. Because I can absolutely appreciate the amazing work that Gurdwara do in Seva, Langar. And there are some Gurdwaras that are really moving progressively. So we went to Camberley Gurdwara down south. They're actually doing martial arts classes, women's well-being groups, fertility discussions, drug and alcohol abuse services coming in on Sundays when the congregation is there already. But then what we often find is still, I remember as a child listening to old men talk about Sikhi and me just sitting there going, I didn't have a clue what they were saying. How can I connect to something I don't understand? And I shouldn't be made to feel like crap for saying that. If that's how we're honestly feeling when we're going to Gurdwara and we're just thinking, actually, I feel guilty because I didn't enjoy it. I didn't get what I wanted from it, because we are soul beings. There's an Atma inside us that wants the real, true knowledge. And we know when we're not getting it. So when you've ever had that feeling that another part, I'm going to Sukhmani Sahib part this Sunday. You know, we've listened to Sukhmani Sahib for years and years, but we don't understand that actually it is the Vidhi of Sukh. It's called Sukhmani because it's saying if you are in distress, if you can connect to what Guru Amar Das Ji tells you, you'll have the root of all your suffering explored in Sukhandi Mani, because that's what it was written for. But we're never sold we're sold Gurbani in a fear-based model. So sometimes our mental health and our physical health becomes disconnected from our spiritual side, and we start looking at all of these things in isolation. And like Saran said, it's all one. Your Atma, your Sareer, you are all one, and you're basically one with schizophrenia fighting with itself. I mean, it's wild. We have our own answers. We know when we're stupid. We know when we're not getting it right. And we also know when we're being disrespected and we shouldn't. But what we have been is generational conditioning over our own common sense. And that's what really disturbs me in our community, is where we will have 3D conversations about really serious things. I've not seen a single protest for a Sikh woman killed by her husband. But if a woman is killed in a certain way, it generates outrage from our collective community. It's almost like we will only acknowledge women if they're harmed in a certain way, but when the greatest harm is actually coming from within the community. But there's no protests, there's no big, well, we tried it, we got death threats, do you know what I mean? When we actually came out with the report and said 60% of our women are saying they've suffered domestic abuse. 1/3 of our women said that they've experienced sexual abuse. 80% of that 1/3 said they experienced sexual abuse as children. So we have a paedophilia problem in our community of families abusing within families, but we don't want to talk about it. But I'm saying if we don't talk about it, who wins? Perpetrators do, and they continue, and the harm that they cause goes into intergenerational, because perpetrators get married, they have kids of their own, they're still invited to the family functions. That dodgy chacha who's on his third wife, him and his third wife are invited to every family function, but that poor divorced niece, she's hiding in the corner somewhere because she's still embarrassed to tell her family that she's divorced. But chacha's rocking up with the renter bride is brought from somewhere, and no one's asking where the first 2 wives are gone, or even if they're still alive, because apparently one went to India and disappeared, and no one's ever seen her since. Look up the case of Sir G. Atwell. These are real life case studies. Women became so disposable that when they stopped obeying, they were killed, discarded like pieces of trash.
But Suki, but on that journey, I think, so with the mental health, before they got to that, they would have had mental health issues, right? And at what point do we as a community, or did we as a community, or when should we recognize those and intervene, right? Intervention, what does intervention, are you allowed to? Because who are you to get involved in my family? Know your place, stay out of it. But you're recognizing a red flag or something. So we don't even want to talk about the bit when it gets to that bit, because it's happened, right? Now we're picking up what's happened after. We want to be like in prevention. So when we're noticing our daughters or moms, you know, I mean, our moms who are in domestic violent relationships, and, you know, even now when you see something, you might see the way, you know, a male talks to a female of that generation, you're like, damn, that's so disrespectful. But they're so conditioned that they're enabling, aren't they? The women enable it, and they just go in, and you're just like, wow. How do, yeah, but how do we, it's almost like, it's how do we have that mental, like that conversation with them to go, like, you don't need to put up with this, or you can see, sometimes you see a woman who's older than us in our mom's generation, you see the way they kind of carry themselves, and you can see they've been hammered down. they don't know how to deal with it. They don't even know something's happened to them. They don't even know something's wrong. Do you know what I mean? And I think you see that. I think when we talk about mental health, I think we focus on us and our kids, and we're forgetting there's a whole generation above us who may have inflicted and may have endured whatever, but they also suffer from mental health. But I don't think they understand. What you've talked about there with the Sikhi as well, the word that came to mind was comprehension.
Yeah.
Right? How much do we comprehend about mental health? What do we actually understand about mental health or fertility or addiction, whatever it is? How much do we actually understand? Because we use these words. I mean, did any of us look up what mental health in the dictionary where it says? No, because we've all got our perceptions of what mental health is and all mental health issue. But I just think how much of there's so much of this across all the generations and across both genders. You know, men are the probably predominant perpetrators, but you do see you see stuff the other way around. And I'm worried with what I'm seeing, for example, in the addiction space, and sadly that, you know, predominantly before it was men who used to drink. And I remember my mum used to say to me, she goes that when we were little, she was the police, they would never stop an Indian woman driving because they would know Indian women don't drink, which they didn't, but up in Lebanon they would, because they would always be over the limit. So she would say they would never stop Indian women. But sadly now, our generation, younger generations, you know, are drinking a lot more. And I'm not judging, but if we've got an epidemic with the men drinking, that means we've got a pending epidemic with the women drinking. Absolutely. Which then means me, who is a daughter of an ex-addict, in 40 years' time is a daughter of parents of an addict, right? So what is that going to do to mental health, right?
I was just going to say, just to roll off on what you've said, you have broke down what generational kind of trauma and cycles are. Just in case anyone's listening, I just need to get this out there. If you are, it's very rarely about the substance. It's very rarely about the alcohol or the weed or the cocaine or whatever it is. It's very rarely about that. What is driving these addictions is unprocessed trauma. I think people think, oh, he's an addict. And they're kind of like reduced to that word, an addict, or in recovery, when actually, no, nobody just decides to wake up and say, hey, I'm just going to like mess my life up and become an addict. It's an escapism. Whatever substance it is, it's an escapism. Now, whether it's alcohol, whether it's sleeping around, whether, you know, there are different maladaptive behaviors when it comes to escapism. So if there is anybody who's in recovery or they call themselves an addict, that's great. But understand that you shouldn't be reduced to that label, that there's a reason, there's a force, there's a reason why you had to choose these escapes. It's because you're escaping from something. And that is what needs tending to, not putting a plaster on it. You have to go right to the core of these wounds that sit in your body, not just your memory. And about this whole generational trauma stuff, there's something called cellular memory. Now, cellular memory is this. Now, this is crazy. This is neuroscience, epigenetics, gene expression. So people think that, oh, you're just an addict, or your dad was, or your great-granddad was. Actually, imagine we've come 5 generations down from this day, and you talked about your dad. Now, imagine none of your family drinks from today, none. And then your great-great-grandson looks at a drink, he's out with his friends, and he has a drink. Now, people think that it's just trauma, but it's not. There are many reasons you become an addict. It's genetics, it's biological, it's environmental, it's mental. So when you pick up a drink, sometimes you can wake up the cellular memory of your great, I think it goes back 14 generations. So even when you have trauma, say if someone's gone through domestic violence, somebody might be like, oh, okay, you got slapped or something, but you know, you're acting like you've got ran over or something. Not that there's any competition in these things, but some people are so broken when they go through trauma, and it's not because of the trauma. Sometimes you've woke up the cellular memory of your ancestors who have been through something similar, and now you'll have to deal with those kind of visceral, residual energies from what have been embedded in your DNA. So it's called DNA coding. So your DNA is made up from what your ancestors have been through. And we all know we come from a line of shaheeds, right? So when we have literal trauma and resilience inside of us. So when you do go through something, if you're wondering why am I making such a big deal, or this isn't, my reaction isn't in proportion to what's happened, it's because your reaction is being laced charged and driven by your ancestral DNA as well, your cellular memory. We need to know these things so that we can actually like give ourselves a pass, like, oh, okay, it's because of this, and not sit in shame and think, am I a weakling? Am I a wimp? Because I've seen a lot of dads call their sons wimp this, wimp that. You don't know that the children that are being born now, they are going to be the cycle breakers. That means they're going to have to go through the worst suffering that we've seen. Our children are going to have to suffer. Does that make sense?
If we don't do the fixing in our timeline,
Yeah.
all you do is you pass on that mess to your children. And in our work, your work, this is a collective thing that we are seeing. This is why now we started off with intimate partner violence. It's now turning into adult family violence now. Now in the domestic homicide review space, suicides has overtaken homicides. And now the number of sons killing moms is overtaking any other familial dynamic of where homicides occur. So then like you've got this like it starts, I say in a joking way, Hai Mera Munda syndrome. Like, there might be some men in the room who literally grew up in a privilege that their sisters didn't. Then what that does is, I feel so sorry for like men because I know some amazing men. Then you kind of look at their moms and I'm just like, oh, bachara, that boy had potential. But you can see that the mom, because she never had a good link with her dad, has latched onto her son. Like, I remember Rishta days, Hi, mera munde ne tera apna cha da cup nahi banaya. And it's like, we laugh about it, but what you've done is, men are capable and men should have been given the opportunity to be men and not be coddled by mummy. And they don't necessarily want it. I don't look at men and blame men for that, so I don't want this to be construed that way. But this is something that many of us grew up seeing. And if we don't fix it ourselves, if we don't recognize those things and take personal, individual responsibility, not for what's happened, but how to fix things, then like what Sadan said, it absolutely is passing down. And that's
Suki, you see that now. Whether if we want to have a candid conversation, then let's have it. Then you see it now. I've seen our generation, mums with their boys, the mollycoddling that goes on. It's the same mollycoddling in a new environment, in a new generation. It's still that running around after them. All right, some of us might say, yeah, I get my kids to do chores and stuff. It's nowhere near where it should be, like compared to like what we used to do. And in fact, you might get the mollycoddling not just now with boys, but with girls. So does that make it okay? Do you know what I mean? So because the mom who spent all that time with her son would have had some kind of vulnerability to then invest in her son. So there's mental health issues there that weren't addressed, and it could be a domestic violence relationship with the husband, it could be trauma with the parents, there's all that baggage, and now they've invested in this son, because don't forget, for that generation, having a son gave them validation. So now if that's what's given them validation, they need to hold on to this, and it needs to be the best it can. So then that's fine, that's that generation, and we know what the consequences of being raised like that. But our generation, the one thing I do want to talk about in mental health is accountability. So Sadan, when I say, yeah, I've got issues and I come to you, at that point I've taken accountability, because now I want to heal, I want to get better. But what if I don't want to heal? I just want to keep telling you how ill I am, how ill I am, how ill I am. What am I going to be doing for my kids?
Yeah. This kind of leads on to my next question, which you've mentioned. It's not just the person who's going through that mental health journey, it's everyone else around them as well who's actually going through that challenge, whether it is a trauma in terms of addiction or fertility or sexual violence or anything like that. I'm going to bring in yourself, Serena, because your journey, people may just think that was your journey, but there were many other people around that who experienced something as well and went through a mental health journey as well.
Yeah, 100%. I think it was never just me that went through that mental health aspect. I'm always very open in the sense that when I did go through my first miscarriage, my husband really struggled. And I think it goes back to all of the things that have kind of been said of men have been conditioned to not talk about their feelings, to not open up and say that they have a mental health issue. They've partly been, and part of that reason is because they have been mollycoddled, and parents have said, oh, don't say anything because what are people going to say? You're going to be judged. But also they've been kind of conditioned to be the strong one. And I remember saying to my husband at the time, all I really needed during our first miscarriage was for you to say to me, I get it. I needed you to break down the same way I was breaking down, to know that we were on the same page. We were both going through the same trauma. Not only that, I feel that my own family went through their own trauma, but my parents could never speak to me about how they were feeling around our losses. And that really created a barrier because one, yes, they were from a different generation that never really talked about mental health. But I was asking for that. Can you talk to me about how you're feeling? Tell me, is it affecting your mental health? And I wasn't getting that response that I needed.
And I wonder if it's a sense of guilt. Were they guilty of feeling that way when they think you should be feeling that way? We get that, but why am I feeling a certain way? And then I'm going to bring, what you were saying, and you were speaking to mothers and daughters as well. Do they feel guilty that they're feeling a certain way when they're here for their loved one?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, for example, they can feel really angry and they feel guilty for feeling angry. Or sometimes it's extreme. They can even be like, if they've got the loved ones in active addiction and they can be quite disruptive, they can even say, I just want it to end, interpret that how you will. And they feel so guilty for feeling that way. But it's because they can't cope. They can't cope with the day-to-day disruption. It's interesting that you say that your parents couldn't talk to you. And I think sometimes our parents will say the most craziest things. Like they'll go, "Jal ho," and you're like,
yeah,
no.
yeah.
And what they're trying to do what they're trying to do is support you. But you're thinking, just give me a little bit more, please. Like, let's talk about it. It's okay. But I think they just struggle. And this is what I mean, like, we talked earlier about, like, what about our moms? Like, how can they talk about it? So I think that's probably what you were faced with.
And I think they don't have,
next time.
yeah,
All those...
They don't have the tools they're not in that space to kind of recognise, like someone said earlier, they don't recognise that something needs to change. They've got all this trauma, and how do we break that? Because it's just been a line of conditioning and don't talk about it.
And you know what,
okay,
Serena, the saddest thing is, if you were to ask around our mum's generation, many of them had many miscarriages, and many of them they were not given the space to talk about it. And I'm not talking about one. You'll hear some women that had like 6 in a row, and you can't comprehend that. You cannot get your head around that. So then when we're going through it and we're in touch with our feelings and stuff, I wonder if they've diminished the experience because they couldn't feel what they felt. So sometimes we have to show compassion.
Yeah.
As hard as it is.
I think there's a lot of women out there who have gone through that loss who haven't had the space to talk about what they've gone through and how they felt, or even if they've struggled with, things like PCOS or endometriosis, all of those things that are not spoken about in previous generations, that our generation are now saying, hold on a second. And it goes back to what you said about trauma comes out in physical ways. Yes, Kieran, who had an alcoholic father growing up, maybe the physical response to that was her endometriosis going through puberty or a PCOS. You don't know all of those things.
Serena and Nina have kind of like, you've brought a point together that it's about being seen and heard. And from the times we are children, we are seen but not heard. And that's where those original wounds begin to form, that add to your subconscious, get buried in your subconscious, and that's what creates your reality. So actually, remember when you were saying sometimes they just go on and on and on and on, and they don't want to get better, or they might be in victim mind state. Sometimes it's you've not been heard or seen for so long throughout your life. Actually, you need that. You need that space. That's why we have spaces like therapy and the groups that we do. We have that. So eventually, when they've got it out and that energy has discharged out of their body, that's when they're like, okay, I'm done now. Does that make sense? So sometimes it does sound like it's a broken record, but until that person is done, that's why they have to go and pay a professional, because nobody at home wants to. No one's got time for this. No one's got time for this. Yet you have to go and pay somebody. And I'm not against therapy. I'm a therapist, obviously. I'm not against it, but you have to have certain a skill set to even be a good therapist. You need to make sure you're not re-traumatizing that client. You're not making them feel shame and guilt. You're not abandoning them by not being congruent and by not showing unconditional positive regard, not showing acceptance and warmth and non-judgment. These are the core conditions of a great counsellor. And it's very sad. And I don't know why I'm bringing this up, but I think it really needs to be brought up. I have many, many new clients come into me saying, I need some help. And I'm like, okay, so what brings you to therapy? And you know what it is? It's because they've been going on Instagram and finding in the wild west of Instagram these self-proclaimed therapists who have never been to, never done a course, they don't know that you're not supposed to re-traumatize a client, and they're doing, a lot of body-based work. They're allowing that trauma to come up, and they're like, bye then, and they don't actually process that with the client. I've seen a lot of that
That's just the
happening.
start of their journey. They need someone there long term.
Even therapy needs regulating in a way, because I have seen the wild west of Instagram, people saying they're therapists and all of these things, and then they're leaving clients. And a lot of Asian women have come to me with this. So that's a whole new problem.
Just on that though, could it be as simple as starting those conversations at home? Someone says to
Absolutely.
someone, a mother or a sister or a brother, they say, I'm really struggling with this. It's as simple as, how can I help?
It's no capacity though. Sometimes there is no capacity to people, as we were discussing. We can't people all the time. We've got no capacity from this whole repressing and suppressing. So when we expect people in our household to hold space for us, well, who's holding space for them? So this is why we have, we've got something in the pipeline as well to create these spaces globally. We've come up with something. So we're not just going to talk the talk and just, leave people alone, but we need to create the spaces.
I'm going to come back to the little joke I made. Put your hands up if there is a galabo masi in your family or a galabo mama. Be honest now. Be honest. Is there someone in your family that really you think, you know what, if you weren't part of this, we'd be fine? It comes back to who is impacted. Do you see everyone quickly put their hands up and put them down, but a large percentage of this room put their hands up. So who is impacted? The community is impacted, because right now we just saw prevalence, and the amount of hands that went up shows that this is something in every other household, that the kind of views and attitudes, that there's someone who is unhealed, or there is a family or there is a collection in your family of unhealed people, and they ensure that the rest of the tribe stay unhealed. Then it's like if you try and cut off from them, so you will get blamed, you will be black sheep, you will be othered. When we look at boundaries, because when you're looking at who's impacted, we're not even talking about like children with learning difficulties who have autism, ADHD, who are nonverbal. We're not thinking about the LGBTQ plus community that is emerging and is in crisis, because we don't even acknowledge they exist. And if they do, they exist in pockets of Instagram, because that's where they find acceptance. But they're not. There's so much, and the elderly women who are single and looking after and living with sons. We've got these marginalized parts in our community. The single mom, after the dad leaves, he swills off into the sunset with his 7th or 11th wife. God knows what wife he's on. But she's still dealing with the 3 kids that he's left her with, where he takes no accountability, no maintenance. Then there's no father figure in that child's life. Then there's the cohort of single women who are raising their kids like flipping champions, but also the single dads, because now what we're seeing is, you see, we are a patriarchal community. If I just wrap up this conversation we have, the behavior of the man dictates a lot. If you had a good man in your family, your grandfather, your father, the trajectory of that family is generally good. But if you've had that matriarchal toxic male in your family, that seed spreads wide. And when that seed spread wide, it's then coming down generationally. Now women are learning from those maladaptive patterns. So the cycle is the men do it. So before addiction services, alcohol, is the men getting drunk at the weddings, women driving them all home. So now it's the women quietly getting drunk, because where has this behavior been? We can't escape accountability. And if we are accountable, then we can draw a line under it and start looking at the theory of change. And what does the theory and strategy of change look like in the Sikh Punjabi community at an individual level, at a familial level, then at a community level? Right now, there's a massive role missing in our community that other communities, I think, get, which is the role of community. Like when we look at fertility issues, we see the ugly side of that. We see Kurimar is still prevalent. We still see the preference of the boy child. And, we routinely get cases where men are divorcing women because they've only had girls. yet the science says, or they can't have children, and these women are abandoned by spouses. So, like, we can't hide away from this. Our people are doing this, and we know we're doing this, but we're just not talking about it. Almost like it will go away. If we suppress it, it will just go. It's not gone away. What you've done is you've created a new generation with new problems, because you're sweeping it under the rug has not swept anything away. All it's done, it rears its head in maladaptive ways, which is why there is for Sikh Women's Aid, I'll be clear, we will know when we are successful, when we can close it down. Our success is you won't need us. It's that simple. If we're needed, we're still in crisis.
Yeah, and that brings me back right to my next question, which is support and talking about it. Obviously, we're here talking about it today, but that's an hour and a half space with you all here. There's more that we can do. There's more that you all do yourselves in your own spaces, but there's got to be more that we can do. We're just chatting here now. That can spread, but that's on social media. That's for people talking. What's the next step? What can we do out there? Also on a local level, I'm going to say the word sisterhood. Does there need to be a better sisterhood out there if we're talking about female mental health and their well-being? There's got to be something else at a local level. Are we doing something wrong? Do we need to do something better?
I think we need to be more brave, but as women, and I'm going to use an opposite. On Mondays when I have this call with this group, so this is a group of women I would never have met, because the common denominator is that I loved ones in addiction. So we've come together, and there's all ages. So there's Benjis who are much more senior to me and have a lot of Sikhi Gyan, and it's amazing. And then I have younger baby sisters as well in that group, so it's amazing. But they're not my best friends. They're not my sisters. They're a sangha to Akom, and we are so connected. And it's such a beautiful group on a Monday that I would never have met these people. And I say that to them nearly every Monday. I'm like, I would never have met you. I'm blessed. And we always leave all our meetings like acknowledging that. I just want to touch upon a point as well, which is around support. So, you just asked when, you can ask your family member or someone and go, what can I do to help? And I think it's worth noting that sometimes the reason why families probably aren't the best and we're a bit like, we don't know what to do. If you just take me and my siblings, we've all had the same parents. And my sister might say, well, I'm experiencing this. And I'm like, no, you didn't. They were my mum and dad. Like, no, you didn't. So therefore, I'm not the best person. Because if you think about when you do your driving theory test, and you do the hazard test, it's every time you see a hazard and you click. Every time your sibling says something about, say, your parents that they've experienced, it's hitting hazards, and you're like, no, and you're getting riled. So actually, sometimes it's okay to go, I'm not great, but I've got a support network over there, because that's better for me. Because if I talk to you about it, I'm probably going to annoy you or say things that isn't your truth, but it's my truth, because we all have different parents. Because my parents were different to the oldest child compared to the youngest, and they've had 4. They haven't been consistent because circumstances, environments change. So when we talk about support, I think we just assume it's these same people all the time who will then get exhausted, right? But it's not. But as women, you have to be committed. If you're going to join a support group, you've got to show up. This whole I'm too busy, it irritates me. Maybe it's my age, yeah. It irritates me, because fine, you're not making time for yourself. Carry on being too busy. But if you want to heal, and sorry, Sarah, this is what I was on about the accountability. Someone's like, if you want to heal, then give yourself that time. And I'm not talking about, I always say that if you want to heal in life, you need balance. So you need your physical, your spiritual, your nutrition. You need your work, because that's you. You need your kids, your family, your daughter, whatever you are. You need a balance, and if you do too much or too less of any one thing, you'll find you are not in a good. Something's not right. And don't get me wrong, mental health issues can be a lot deeper than that if it's in the realms of depression and that. But the one thing you've got to say is, I do want to heal. I do want to get better. Because unless you do that, like we say to the addict, do you want to get into recovery? Until you say, I do want to get better, I'm sick of feeling like this, you're not going to get better. So then, if you do want to get better, that's when the support groups come in, and that's when they'll all help. So I think, from a sisterhood point of view, yeah, we do need more. If you're suffering from endometriosis, I'm not going to be able to help too much because I don't know that subject matter. But got the support group to help you there, and people who look like you, right? Not on a Gora one. You want to go to Apania who are really comfortable to have that conversation without judgment, stigma, shame, all that. Because I think for me, that's what good looks like. And also what I was saying is, what about our moms who are they going to talk to, and how do we set something up for them? Wouldn't it be great if we were all sat here and it's all of our mums chatting?
I think
That we owe them as well.
I think, with healing, it's not linear anyway. It's ebbs and flows. We are beings that contract and expand. When we feel stressed out, we go small. Our spine collapses, our chest caves. That's what happens to our body. And then when we're happy, we're joyful, we expand. So it's ebbs and flows, but the spaces should always be there, regardless, for you to come in and out of, But I do have to say this. I feel like when something is set up for free, it's not valued. Now, it is not valued. Now, I see many women in my family throwing their money at all sorts of stuff. Why can you not invest a small, you're investing in yourself at the end of the day, a small amount for you to process your trauma, have a community of women, because a lot of women are isolated right now. A lot of humans are isolated right now. And that for me, this is a war on consciousness. We are human beings, we're tribal, we need community, we need warmth and connection. But I feel the way, the powers that be, or the way the world is so rat racy and constant like pressures and demands, we are very, everything we do is so externalized, nothing's internal. So if you are able to find spaces, even if you have to invest a small amount, you're not investing in that, you're investing in yourself. And if you do that on a wide scale, so we're talking about micro and macro. Micro levels, I have my own wellbeing circles for women, but I want to take it macro. I was talking to Suki, we need to expand this so it's across, global almost. And when there are different sort of issues that are, say pertaining to women's health or fertility, or if it's sexual abuse or dementia, those spaces will have enough people with their own experience. Remember, you don't have to be just a professional. Women, their lived experience is enough, Their lived experience is enough. So if we set up these spaces, which we're about to do soon, you've got everything you need there. You're going to have a vast array of women talking about things. And you said something about how women are like becoming champions and we're doing everything. Now, every human being, men have their masculine energy with a drop of feminine, and then women have feminine energy with a drop of masculine. And the reason we're made like that is because in tribal times or primitive times, if our husbands died or our tribes we've lost our tribe, women need to have that masculine energy to dip into, to survive, to go into survival and protect her young, a bit like the animal kingdom. Now, the issue is we have become so in survival that we have lost touch with our femininity, with our softness. And then in the home, that also keeps a loop going of being combative women with husbands. I'm not saying husbands are innocent or women are bad. I'm not saying that. But I've also seen those cycles. But what Suki said, it does start with the male because he's the leader, right? So the male has to be functional, emotionally stable, emotionally mature. He needs to be the safe container for his woman where she could submit to that leadership. Because, and that doesn't mean if people say, oh, you're a feminist, you're this, that, toxic, that's not true. Women, you've been married 15 years, you probably get called the biggest feminist out here. She's been married for years, she's got a successful marriage with an amazing husband, haven't you? So
yeah, no, I think what you just said there just hit a really important point about coming back to accountability. But also, like, we as women, there is no war of women against men. Seriously, I worry more about men than I do about women, because I'm like, what is happening to our brothers in the community? There's Andrew Tate, Red Pill. I'm not sure if people have watched Adolescence. And it's like, if we say, oh, stop killing women, feminist, it's like, no, someone with a brain. I'm just going to go back to Kanchan Kumari, the whole murder in India. There was an honor killing that took place by an Amritari man. And our community were like, Soda laya. And I'm like, bruv, you are in a bana. Koi nahi soda laya. You paved your way to Narak. You used the bana to kill someone because your words were ineffective. Guru Nanak from Guru Gobind Singh Ji, the sword came last. It was the power of your Bani. It was the power of how well you were connected to the God inside you, which Nanak was. That's why you could sit him with a cannibal and he would just through Gyan Charcha, like our communication, conversations, men are so important to the family unit. it's yin yang. One cannot survive without the other. And what I don't like, and where we're moving towards, which is why the collaboration and the interventions are needed, is because I think men and women are just being socially driven away from each other. And that goes against who you are naturally as men.
War of genders. We do not want to
We do not want
fuel
war of
a
genders.
war of genders. Like I've seen it in many communities, and I can see it seeping into the Sikh
Ours?
community, and it's not good. It's not good because you need both sides for equilibrium. Everything is about balance, as you said. You need both. We don't want to be, we don't want to come from broken homes, do we? Because at the end of the day, I know that it's better to be from a broken home than live inside of one. But what we want to do is prevent even having those broken homes. Now, the reason I brought the cycles and about women being combative isn't just to blame women. It's actually to say that that is a woman who is tired, who's in her masculine energy because she doesn't feel safe and supported at home. But I need to say that is not the man's fault either. Because if you look up generations, even the men in our generation, it's learnt behavior from their fathers and their fathers. Again, it comes to that cellular memory and learnt behavior, unconscious, repetitive behavior. So somewhere we all need healing. It's not about men did this, women do that. We all need support. We need to start again creating spaces where we learn about this stuff. So put your hands up if you knew there was a space where you can learn from A to Z, right from being in the womb to this present moment, how you can process what may be holding you back, things that you've outgrown. Would you join these spaces, men and women? Would you? You can put your hands up if you would. So we kind of get, so we all know we're not perfect. We've all got needs. So
I just want to come in on that. And I'm going to say this to the Bibiya more. Like we offer a free counseling service. Oman is here. She's one of our therapists. Women are the one who cancel appointments the most. Everything else is priority over them. And it's so sad because we're at a place now where because we are so in demand, we have to now say, right, you missed 3 appointments. You're out of our service now. You're back on a waiting list because I've got 17 women who are trying to get in. But even women committing to that, it's so sad when it's like, but I've got this. This is about you and your healing. And women still feel that's quite a selfish thing to do. And that makes me sad because I'm like, you healed, you bring the best version home. I've had therapy. I've had some of the best therapy of my life in lockdown. And honestly, the person I am today wouldn't have happened without that therapist. It's just like we go to the doctors when we need a blood test and we're anemic and we need a blood transfusion, we fixed it. If something's not right, look at mental health in the same way. Something that needs committing to. If you're given a 19-day course of antibiotics, you take it, don't you? But if you're given 8 to 10 free sessions of therapy that you don't have to pay for, it shouldn't be like, oh, Benji, I missed the appointment. It is literally God saying to you, this is your time to heal. And all you have to do is take it. So this is how we explain it to clients, that there's something here for you. All you need to do is take it, show up at that time every hour and put in the work, and the rest your hard work will serve you. But again, as women, nyane, bache, career, my kid has mental health issues, my children, everyone else's issues come before us. And that's a big hurdle, I think, as women, we need to overcome. I do
But
feel
we
we're
need to,
moving in that way.
if you want to heal, Suki, you need to say that. So I just took on a bit of clean eating a couple of months ago, and I had to tell my in-laws next door, because now I wasn't going to rock up for roti pani every day. Yeah, they're going to be like, so I had to say to them, like, I'm just watching what I eat and stuff. And then they were like, okay, I get it. So if you're going to commit to healing, then you need to tell the people around you. So because they won't invade. I don't believe we come from a community who deliberately will invade on your time. They'll ask you to do something last minute. You at that point choose to cancel your appointment or go yeah to them. But if you've told them in advance and go, look, on these days, I'm going to be in this support group or have these appointments. Like my in-laws know, Monday's 8 o'clock, she's in a meeting for everybody knows. Like, if you share that information, I do feel you'll get the support to attend the sessions you need to. And it's funny you say that. My trainer was saying to me, more women bail compared to men. And I think, God, that makes me think, guys, there's a commitment issue here, because I do feel there is. And I don't think it's always us putting other people first. I think it's us thinking it's okay to. So we've got to take some responsibility for that. It's a behavior, right? So if you do what you say you're going to do, you're going to heal. And I think, yeah, and I think I say that probably more so. I'm definitely the oldest on the panel, and I'm thinking, well, I've hit that peak and I'm on my way down. I don't have that much time. I need to heal because now I need to be my best self, right? You guys are on the other side probably. So I think that's why I talk a lot more about accountability, because I've done all the excuses, the in-laws of my kids, swimming, all that. It's just not important. If your kids miss a swimming lesson, if your kids miss this, honestly, it is not important. You know, when we take our kids out of school to take them on holiday, we go, 2 days isn't going to affect their life. They're going to learn more on the holiday. Or guess what? If you sacrifice that 1 hour, whatever it is, to attend a meeting that's going to serve your soul, right, mind, body, and soul, just do it. Just commit to it. And if it then doesn't work for you, admit it and go, that didn't work for me, instead of I didn't get time.
I just
Right.
want to touch on the support. I think for me, particularly in the fertility space, I don't think men get the same support women do. I also think that women are more likely to seek out the support groups and the spaces for fertility. So I kind of want to go on the flip side of that and say, I would really urge men to find those support groups. We hold men's spaces, and I remember the first kind of session that my husband did, there was no cameras on, no one spoke, and he must have sat there and spoke for 45 minutes. But it is so important for both men and women to find those spaces and give themselves that time. Don't be afraid to join those spaces because they are so helpful. It might be that you get a piece of advice, which is the missing link that you need for, you know, your fertility to work maybe, or you need to ask a doctor a certain question. Women tend to kind of go off and do that research, and I know that we will find what we need or look for what we need, but I would really like to urge men to do that too, because I think it's really important for both of us. And I think only then when men find that support and be in that best space, a woman can then be in her best space too, and they can collaborate.
Because that impacts each other's mental health, doesn't it? Yeah, because then they might know which questions to ask you because they've had that support and advice. And it isn't in isolation. When we talk about women's health, then we're mothers. Our health impacts our kids, including our boys. You know what I mean? So we do need to invest in men's mental health as well.
And you need to invest now. It's such a shame that we feel like we have to wait until, like you said, kids go through all their classes, maybe get them to university, settle down, go on holidays, and now you can breathe, and now you think that you can do it, but you need to invest in yourself now at a young age.
There's something interesting that you said about that. Sometimes you think, oh, I'll deal with myself in a few years when they're older, but actually, do you know the way you mother, the way you father, the presence that you bring with that child as they grow up? If you are dysregulated, and if you are not taking care of yourself and you have passed the point of resilience now and there's no capacity, do you know that child has got mirror neurons and they will actually pick up on your dysregulation, and you're actually burying that energy inside of them, because we are beings that emit and transmit. Did I say that right? Emit and, did I say that right?
Yeah,
Transmit. No, I said it wrong. I was like, hold on, what's wrong with me? Transmit and receivers. We are transmitters and receivers of energy. So when you are parenting in that state, do you know it doesn't matter how big your smile is, they are energetically, through mirror neurons, kind of reflecting and burying and planting seeds to be the same when they're older. That's why you will get a mother, a bit like myself, who will look like they've all got it together. And I homeschool, like I home educate my children, then I do all this. It's just constant, but they'll see me with a smiley face, but deep down, I'm like, I'm knackered. I'm exhausted. Like, it's just, I'm so exhausted that I need a holiday from a holiday from a holiday. Do you know? But those children aren't, they're so sharp. They know. My kids, you can't fool my kids. They're too sharp. Because they're, like, if you know my kids, you know my kids, but like they're energy-based beings. They're not fully conditioned by the world yet. They're only young. So they work through mirror neurons and energy. So if you want to mother better and father better, make sure you're a regulated being. Make sure you are a present being, because otherwise it all goes to vain. You know, it goes in vain, to be honest. So make sure you are regulated. Make sure you make time so you do mother better and father better. And you're doing enough anyway. Everybody here, I'm sure, is doing enough. So don't ever think that I'm not enough or I should do more. These are some of the core wounds that I see in my clients. I'm not enough. I feel abandoned, rejected, neglected, unwanted, unimportant. I've not felt seen and heard. There's not been attentiveness. These are the common wounds. So please give that to yourself. Give that to your younger inner child that may not have received that. So make time to tend to that inner child so that you parent better.
And that's so important as parents, because those of us who have children, our children are in an unregulated online space. So if there's one advice I would give is like just watch what your children are doing online. It is such a vast space right now. I feel like I look at my kids sometimes and I'm like, you lot are aliens. What you call problems, I would never consider that a problem. Your problem is you're choosing between Netflix, Amazon Prime, and Disney Plus. Our problem was Nana's drunk at the pub again. Who's going to drag him out and carry him into the car? I mean, sometimes we can look at our own situations and be like, how are you calling this problems? But guess what? Some of us really credit ourselves in how we have already, in our own ways, try to overcome some of the shortcomings of our own upbringing. But your children, they need us at their best. And like exactly what you said, we run Seek Women's Aid, we do all of our community efforts. But the biggest responsibility we have when we sit here as panelists, we've got to take back everything that we're saying here and make sure we're doing it.
And our kids learn from us, okay? So like, for example, my daughter's 14. What she sees in the home, what she sees her mom do, her masi do, her thai do, all these women, is going to shape her. But it's also going to shape now the friend she is to somebody at school. 14, we can all remember our friends at 14 and the friends who were good for us. So if you think about it, they're already now having those, if 14-year-olds have a support network, don't they? Because they've got that. So everything we do, they're learning from us. So if we're not coping because we're putting them first, that's what we're teaching them. Don't put yourself first. You need, do you know what I mean? So we've got to think about what we're teaching. If you say, no, I'm going to do this for me, they're going to know mom did that because that was important. That they're going to learn that's important. So we have to teach. By looking after yourselves, you're teaching them as well that it's important to look after yourself.
I think a big thing of that is just exposure to all of the kind of real situations that happen and exposing the next generation and having those open conversations and letting them know that there's no judgment. Talk about this or open
That's such a valid point because I'm going through my first experience of puberty with boys. Well done to all the mothers who have gone through it. God help the mothers who are about to go through it because it's a wonderful thing because my son actually comes to dad for the nuts and bolts, shall we say, and then he'll come to me for the more generic things. But I didn't realize I had to have a conversation with my son about bad sex, consent, the kind of things he shouldn't be doing and shouldn't be looking at, because I didn't realize that boys have a very different experience of puberty than girls do. Ours is just this thing that happens to us, and half of us started bleeding in school toilets, and we were like, what's happening? I had one girl in school with me who literally thought she was dying because her mom had never told her about periods or anything like that. I thought I would have daughters and I'd be like, when I have a girl, I was blessed with 2 boys. And then the conversations we need to be having with boys to prepare them to be men. And me and my husband, we were like, where do we start? And then where we started, everything we wish our parents had told us. So if there's any advice I could give to parents, or what do you wish your parents had told you? And find a way to have those conversations in an honest and safe way. You're going to get to a point with your kids where you're going to have to become friends with your kids. The parenting lessons, but the friendship starts, and really setting expectations. Like, as my son, these are the expectations I have from you as a mother and as a woman. If you fail to meet those expectations, I can forgive mistakes, but I will not forgive deliberate harm. That's where my Sikhi comes in, that even if you're my son, you hurt someone's daughter, how can I call you my son? Because you've taken God's creation and you've diminished it. So I had to really think about what kind of son I want my son to grow up into. And sometimes you're so busy parenting, you forget you need those moments of pause to be like, does my kid get it? Does my kid get it when he goes to school and he sees people taking pictures of girls' skirts? He should be the one stopping them, or he should be the one telling the teachers. So we have the opportunity to raise the right kinds of kids that are in the if anyone's watched the Adolescence Netflix series, there needs to be boys and girls in schools who are combating the red pill nonsense. And unless we're not raising that alternative, the alternative will start raising our children.
You touched on so many nuances. I'm just going to quickly say, it's a difficult one because we do overcompensate for things we didn't have in childhood. We try to give it to our kid, but there's a very thin line between entitlement and I don't know what the right word, because for anything to exist, the opposite has to exist. So it's like two sides of the same coin. You can raise a very entitled, spoilt brat who will just flake at the word no. That's not good. But on the opposite side, it's like we do things in extreme. We'll either be just really overly loving, and then the other extreme is we'll be really raw, like you this, you that, you know, or like, what is it?
You
Spoil,
can't say
what is
those
it?
words on a podcast.
Yeah,
Sharon.
certain words. I will refrain. But some kids will do that. You know, some parents will have the harsh parenting. Where's the in between? What you've just said is conscious parenting, where you're like, well, I'm doing everything right, and then you've stopped and thought, hold on, do they get it? Because this isn't just my kid. This is someone I'm going to release into society. This is not my kid. You know, this isn't just, I don't own my kid. I'm just the guardian for this, to make this person self-sufficient and not be I need to watch my work. This is why you can't put me on TV. You can't put me on telly because I've got a putty now.
Another language is
So
slipping.
you've just got to make sure that your child's not come on, help me. An idiot. Oh, is that bad?
That's fine.
Okay, so you got to just make sure they're not. So you can't completely be loving and kind just because you didn't get that or you think that's all they need. Because then they won't have a backbone.
They won't
be resilient.
lessons.
Yeah, then they won't know what no means. They'll just flake. That's when mental health will really break their, you know, they will have challenges there. But then if you be too harsh, then they're going to go out, you know, emulating that behavior. So it's definitely a balance. Conscious parenting.
Well, it brings me to the end and our very last question. It's been such a brilliant conversation. You guys all have such amazing skills to bring to the table. And I'm going to end with this last question. If you guys answer in a couple of minutes, and we'll go from here to here. What is your vision for a positive future in mental health in Punjabi communities? We bring it back to that community.
For me, I think it's for both men and women, but I think it's for all generations. I think we miss our parents' generation because they've raised us and we know what we're going through and we're looking downwards, but we've got to show them some love and compassion. And wouldn't it be great if, you know, if they've got whatever time they've got left, they've got a space to talk about stuff and leave the earth lighter. So for me, it's what do we do for our moms? What do we do for our dads in terms of safe spaces? And then the same for us as well. But then for our generation who are much more aware and stuff, what do we do to commit to those safe spaces? It's all very well setting them up and, you know, it takes a lot of effort. And what people need to remember is a lot of the stuff we do in our own time. So, you know, it's not my full-time job. I do this over, like, sort of outside of it. So if I'm going to do this because people need it, then just show the respect and turn up. And then what will happen, you'll heal and you'll get better. And then what we'll do is we'll have these support groups well established for the next generation, for our kids. So for me, that's what good looks like. In terms of where, how, you know, there's loads of mediums. There's a space here today. There's Gurdwara, there's Zoom calls. You know, if you want it to happen, you'll make it happen. But for me, it's all generations and both genders.
Mine's a bit of a unique kind of answer because of the work that I do. So for me, quantum physics, neuroscience, spirituality, Sikhi, trauma, mental health, they are all one thing to me. So for me, you said Punjab. Punjab is the land of 5 rivers. And we come from there. And, you know, Guru Nanak Dev Ji and our gurus walked that earth. For me, we sat here today, we come from a line of shaheeds. We wouldn't be here as Sikhs if it weren't for them. So we must honour our heritage and where we come from and the sacrifices. That's number one. And that's not just to make it all about Sikhi, but for me, it is all about Sikhi because Sikhi is healing. To me, Sikhi is healing. There's no difference between our Sikhi and Bani and the stuff I learn in a classroom at university. There is no difference for me. It's aligned. So for me, the great vision for Punjabis would be that actually we normalise these spaces. We set them up. If you think, oh, I really wish there was a place like that, well, go create it, because you'll see how quickly that will get filled up. So if you think, well, who am I? No, well, we all started somewhere. Create the spaces yourself. If you think, oh, I could have done with that, well, go and create it. Be visionaries. Don't wait for other people to do stuff. Do it yourselves. And so for me, it's about creating those spaces on a macro level now. And like I said, something is in the pipeline and the proof will be in the pudding. So for me, it's like we say, you know, I'm just a facilitator. It's not me. That God essence in us will work through us, and Guru Kirpa, you know, will make a big difference in the world. So for me, there are plans, and that's all. I can just hope and pray that they work out and people utilize these spaces.
Amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, very similar to what the ladies have said, join these support spaces. A big one for me is that I've always kind of alluded to is be the change that you want to see, which kind of links in perfectly with what you've said, Southern, is go out, create the space, join the space, talk to someone, tell someone else to join the space, get involved. Don't be afraid to share your journey because you could change someone's life.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And Suki.
I'm going to go into baby mode for this. Honestly, I sometimes, when you do the work that you do, you look at your community as your family. Like, we're not separate from each other. We're all linked somehow. We don't have to like each other, but we're linked. So your well-being depends on my well-being depends on yours. We are interconnected as a people. I think we've moved away from that, and the more individualized we've become, mental health is now the single resting factor for a lot of people. Mental health is that bridge before you come down to, like, I'd always say, like, you come to Nina and I when it's all collapsing. Now, our data shows that a quarter of all the women responded to our survey had suicidal thoughts because of experiences around domestic abuse. And we've already lost so many women to this. And for me, when you lose a woman in a family, you've lost the axis in which that world spins. No matter how you treat the woman in your family, Punjabi boli purani grey kar ki Lakshmi aaye hai. She is the axis in which it spins. Yes, there's toxicity in women. Yes, there's toxicity in men. Challenge the behavior, not the person. Each one, the message I want to send home today is, what was the point in attending today? And if we, with Sikh Women's Aid is set up, Sikh Recovery Network set up, him collectives there, Sound Therapies here, the services are here. But that's when you want to come out of your familial settings to seek support. It's what you do when you go back into your families. Like, what does the fresh start look like? What do boundaries look like? What does boundaries with the wrong people look like? And what does boundaries with good people look like? I'm going to come back to what I said at the beginning. I am worried. I'm genuinely worried for our men, our women. I'm more worried about the generation that we're leaving behind. And if we don't do some quick wake up realization that, oh, chalo kalu dekhange, gaan dekhange, we're gambling with our children's future. So I think where there is support the organizations. If you do have ideas, come to us. Can we do it? If we can't, go wider and put those systems into place, because I think community, it's going to be a bottom-up approach, and we have been led top-down, and we've been led down a garden path. So I think the new approach going forward goes back to what Sharanjit said at the beginning about collaboration. There is no shame around domestic abuse, mental health, infant. These things have been conditioned into us. Shame has been conditioned into us. And we really need to leave that shame in the past to the people who rested it on our heads. And we need to say, take your shame and on the back. And there's healing that we need to do, because there's a generation coming up behind us of our children. And honestly, that scares me. And I am scared, but I have hope because of the collective movements that I see, but also reach out. I know it sounds so obvious because we're all here, but Seek Recovery have a dedicated helpline. We have a dedicated helpline. You can access 8 to 10 sessions of free therapy, but we will kick you off the service if you miss 3 appointments, because we have a waiting list. And that's our way of saying, if you don't prioritize yourself, if you don't take that first step, we're here. Like I always say, there's a boundary. You've got to come out and want the help and want the support and commit to it. So that's where I'm going to end off. And I do have hope in our people. We are, but when you said that we come from a line of shaheeds, you know what Guru did? He actually said, when you come on my path, forget your lineage of trauma, of harm. He goes, I am going to create a lineage that you sink yourself to. And he gave us the badasses of history, women and men. And he asked you to align your consciousness to your new Piri and to detach from your genetic one. That's the level of transformation that Sikhi can give us. You transmute, so you are of the line of the... I do not call myself, that's not my heritage until I've earned it. I will earn it through my actions in how I treat myself first, then my family, then my friends, then how I then go out into society. But individually, it comes down to each one of us and what we do as supporters if we're fine ourselves. But if we're struggling, knowing that we're worthy enough to reach out for help, support, and guidance, and taking accountability in that space for healing. That's it. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here for that hour and a half. I hope it was really enlightening. It definitely was for me. Please approach everyone here on the panel, chat. There's so much more to talk about.